Hey everyone, and welcome back. And today we are talking all about the beautiful full moon in Leo happening on Sunday, February 1st at 13 degrees of Leo. And this is bold and creative and passionate and inspired energy that has the potential to be a little bit dramatic, but it's also our invitation to release those things that are holding us back from expressing ourselves fully and authentically. With this full moon happening in the sign of Leo, that means it's opposing the sun in Aquarius. And actually, there are 5 planets in Aquarius during this lunation, so that's a lot of Aquarius energy. And so there's like this strong desire to kind of like innovate and break out of the status quo. And this is actually the last lunation before we enter eclipse season, so lots going on here. So if you're interested in how this full moon may be experienced along with all the other astrology we've got going on, then feel free to like and subscribe so you can stay updated on what's going on in the sky. And also, if you're new here, hi, I'm Mackenzie, aka Astromac, and I'm a professional astrologer, and I talk all things astrology on this channel. And I also have a Patreon, and I offer a bunch of different astrology readings, so if you're interested in any of that, then I'll be sure to link all of that down below. And so before we get any further, let's pull up the chart for this full moon and dive right in. And so, as always, full moons happen when the sun and the moon are sitting directly opposite each other in the sky, and the sun is able to fully illuminate the moon. And that's why full moons are associated with things being illuminated and things being revealed and things being brought to our conscious awareness. And just like we're getting a little more clarity, because it's kind of like, the spotlight moment of the lunation cycle, where it's a time of things coming to fruition and things coming to a culmination. And it's also a time of release as well, though, as we're kind of like letting go of those things that we no longer need and letting go of those things that no longer serve us in order to, move forward in a way that is more aligned in order to like, grab onto what's next. And so, like I said, full moons are times where it's like things just get revealed to us and they get brought to our awareness, or, we may have these revelations of our own where, things just feel more clear than they have in the past. So with this heightened level of awareness that we tend to feel during full moons, it also means we're probably going to be feeling a little more sensitive than usual, which is not a bad thing. But when the moon is in Leo, sometimes we can feel our emotions with a little extra like drama and zest. So this can really actually help us, especially if we're wanting to do like these big emotional and energetic releases as we're, letting go of those things that no longer serve us. And so any full moon, regardless of what sign it's in, it's going to be a time of like culmination where our past manifestations are coming to fruition and they're blooming and blossoming. And so, maybe reflect back on that Leo new moon that happened at the end of July and what kind of seeds you were planting during that time, as you may notice that they are, in full bloom during this time. And so, like I said, any full moon is a time of culmination, and it's a moment of awareness and just a time of greater clarity. And so with this full moon happening in the sign of Leo, that means that the sun is in Aquarius. It's that Leo-Aquarius Axis, and this is the axis of recognition and contribution. Leo being that side of recognition, because Leo is the sign that's all about like this authentic and creative self-expression and the heart space and visibility and shining bright. It's ruled by the sun, so you want to be shining bright with Leo, and also taking pride and being courageous and, really taking authorship over one's life. And then Aquarius on the other side being the side of contribution, because it's a sign that's all about like, what we contribute to the collective and to humanity. And so it's all about, our communities and taking like a detached and objective, like zoomed out perspective. Because it's a sign that really wants to innovate and improve our existing systems, because it's all about like this future orientation and really creating a better future for all. And so it's actually a very creative axis if you think about it. Like, I always think of Aquarius as inspiring Leo to create, and it's also that innovation as well, and you have to be creative in order to innovate and really act on that inspiration. And so it really has to do with like how you take your own unique energy and your own unique frequency and self-expression out into the world at large. And so Leo is the part of you that wants to shine brightly and be seen and have the ability to express yourself loudly and brightly and authentically. And so because of that, it can be the part of us that kind of wants that external validation, like knowing that we are being seen and celebrated in some way. But then it's like we've got Aquarius across the sky saying like, yes, I see you, you're shining bright, and like that's all fine and dandy, but it's all about how does your unique light fit into like the bigger picture, because Aquarius is connected to like the collective and to humanity, and it governs our communities and our groups and our friendships and all kinds of associations. And it's all about finding people who are like-minded, who are aligned with you and your vision for the future, in order to really combine our efforts and like, combine our strengths and really attain our hopes and dreams for the future. And so this full moon is really illuminating this Leo-Aquarius polarity and that axis, because it's not really aspecting any other planets, and the ruler of this Leo full moon is the sun in Aquarius. So again, it's just kind of like echoing back and forth and trying to find the balance between these seemingly opposing energies. And so this full moon is really highlighting those themes of, authentic self-expression and how we take that out into the world at large. And as I was looking at this full moon chart, I was really just getting like this feeling of how it's just really like illuminating and highlighting like our heart space. And so we may have realizations under this full moon about like those things that we're passionate about and just about those things that we really care about. And with like that heart space energy as well, I was really feeling like it's helping us to really like tune into our inner child and like that childlike joy, because Leo really helps to remind us of the importance of like, playing and laughing and having fun and, dancing around and being silly and just enjoying life a little more. And if you're someone who pays attention to what's going on in the world, which I think that's very, very important, to stay informed and to pay attention, but, things have felt really heavy lately and, really serious. And so while it's important to, be aware of what's happening around the world, it's also important to live your life. Like, just because the world feels like a complete shit show right now doesn't mean that you should stop living your life, And so with all this Aquarius energy we have in the sky right now, I was really feeling like it's almost helping us to like detach a little bit and, just see things from like a higher and more zoomed out perspective, And so really try to recognize that like you just being yourself and just shining your own unique and authentic light and just like, being like that is just as important as staying informed. And so you may have something be revealed to you like on or around this full moon, or maybe that like, something is just brought to your conscious awareness where you just kind of, realize that you may have been like, dimming your light in order to, keep the people around you more comfortable, or you may be like, keeping yourself small or holding yourself back from expressing like your authentic self for whatever reason. So you really don't want to be dimming your light. And it's funny because when I was like taking notes for this full moon, it auto-corrected to you don't want to be dimming your life, and I was like, yeah, you know what, it's both. You don't want to be dimming your light and you don't want to be dimming your life. And so really pay attention to like, where you're holding yourself back from sharing your thoughts or sharing your ideas, or, where you're holding back and where you're dimming your light. Because this full moon is like an invitation to, stop watering ourselves down and actually, be okay with taking up space and shining brightly. Because when we water ourselves down and we dim our light, it's like it takes away pieces of us. And we really don't want to be doing that. Like, we want to be showing up fully as ourselves. Because when we allow ourselves to actually, shine our light and shine bright, it can almost act as like a lighthouse for other people who are, like-minded and who are aligned with us and our vision, who are just as weird as us. And, it acts as a lighthouse in order for those kind of people who are aligned in order to find us. And when we're like shining our light from this deep space of authenticity, like, from that heart space again, it really gives other people permission to be themselves as well. Like for years, like growing up, I, changed myself depending on who I was around in order to try and fit in. And I think this is probably like the neurodivergent experience. But when I started like, being more of myself and expressing myself from like an authentic space and just like, allowing myself to not fit in, I noticed that the people that I never really felt comfortable around, like they just kind of naturally started to fall away. And then those relationships that stuck around, like, they got even deeper, and like it felt like, it was just easier to be more and more of myself. And then I noticed that like the more that I was able to just like, be myself, like the people around me even told me like, I just feel comfortable being myself around you. And like that is truly like the best compliment ever. Is just like, to have people feel comfortable to be themselves around you. And so I really encourage you to like, be a leader in that way and just like be yourself and release the need to fit in and release the need to be liked by others, because that just like, it doesn't feel good. It just feels good to be able to be yourself. And so there really is a releasing energy because it's a full moon. And so there's a shedding here where we may be releasing like old patterns or old behaviors that really hold us back from expressing ourselves authentically. Or maybe you're releasing like an outdated persona, or maybe there's some kind of role in your life that you feel like you've outgrown, or maybe like you've been seeking attention in some way that just no longer feels aligned. And actually a really good thing to release under this full moon would be like that need to have any kind of external validation, because the most important thing with Leo energy is learning how to, validate yourself and, not needing any kind of external validation, because what's most important here is like, just recognizing that, me just being myself is good enough. Because when we're seeking that external validation, it's almost like we're, asking others to validate that we are, good enough and that we are shining. And, we really, really don't want to become dependent on any kind of like, external validation, whether it's like, compliments or, whatever it might be. And so we need to recognize that like, we are shining, whether people say it or not, but just really know for a fact that when you are, expressing yourself from like this heart space, that you are shining and you're not doing it for anyone else, but you're doing it for yourself. And so as you're releasing that need for external validation, make sure you're replacing it with like confidence and this self-assuredness. So this is kind of that energy of like, you got to be your biggest fan, really. Like, when I first started posting these YouTube videos, like I was definitely like really caught up on like all the numbers, like all the views that I got and like the number of likes, and like that was really, really depleting, and it really took like the fun and the creativity out of it. And so I really had to do some like reflection. I was like, what am I doing this for? Like, what am I doing all this work for? And so now I just like, I make these videos for myself, really. And really like for the handful of people that do watch my videos, like I really appreciate you guys a lot. But like it's a process. Like I've been posting videos on here for almost a year now, and like I really had to release like over and over again that need for any kind of external validation, because again, that just takes all the fun out of it, and it takes like that creativity and that authenticity out of it. And so again, just really like, be your biggest fan and give yourself a pat on the back if you need it. And just recognize that like, you putting yourself out there authentically is incredibly brave and courageous. And like when you express yourself from the heart, like that is amazing. And so really just like learning to validate yourself from the inside. And recognize that when you're being like this warm and generous person and, validating yourself from the inside, what you're really doing is validating your inner child. Because Leo represents like that inner child energy as well. And I think sometimes we forget that, our inner child is still inside of us. And your inner child is listening to all the thoughts that you think about yourself. And so you want to be more kind and loving and generous to yourself. And so again, this is a time to release those things that like, dim your light, and release those things that hold you back from expressing like your authentic self, and, releasing that need for external validation, because when we're constantly seeking validation externally, that has a way of, impacting our confidence levels. And this is a time to really, step into yourself more authentically and confidently. And then after you've done your releasing, whether you like, wrote these things down on a piece of paper and burned it safely, but after you've released them, like you don't want to leave like a void. Like the universe does not like any kind of void. And so you want to be filling it and replacing those things with thoughts and beliefs like, I deserve to take up as much space as I need, and I deserve to shine bright without the fear of being like too bright or too much for others. And then recognize that like you shining your light brightly doesn't mean that anyone else shines any less bright. This is all about, shining brightly again, and like, being your own unique star, and then just like, finding what constellation you fit into, when there's multiple stars that come together to like form a complete picture. So like I said earlier, this full moon is really like, lighting up our heart space and really lighting up what our heart most wants. And when you think about it, like that true self-expression, it really comes from the heart. which is why Leo is associated with like, being courageous and passionate and bold and creative. Because when you think about it, like, it takes a lot of courage to, put yourself out there and express yourself creatively and authentically, because, it's kind of vulnerable in a way where it's like, you're putting yourself out there, and that can sometimes bring in like, judgment or the potential to be rejected or, whatever it is. And so we really have to be courageous under this full moon and, release any fears that you have around expressing yourself and, again, release that need for any like external feedback. Because when we dim our light to try and like, make others feel more comfortable or whatever, that just means that we're not living our life for ourselves, but we're living to accommodate others. And, that's not a life that I really want to live. So hopefully you feel the same. Because if we want to live like these joyful and fun and fulfilling lives, again, we have to take that risk of being judged or rejected by others in order to, live in a way that feels authentic to us. And so this is about just simply expressing ourselves for the sake of expression, because, each one of us deserves to take up space and be seen and be heard. And in that authentic expression is when we find people who are, even more aligned with us and where we're going and aligned with that vision that we have for the future. And I really feel like that's what the world needs more of right now. It's just like this heart-based energy that's more joy and more love and more exuberance and more creativity and more authenticity and just like, more of saying yes to those things that just like, light us up from the inside out and just like, more passion. And with so much Aquarius energy in this chart, there's a ton of like inspired energy with a focus on the collective and the future as well. And so while I think it's important that like, each one of us be our own star and shine our light as bright as we can, I also think it's important to like keep in mind how you as an individual can, shine together with others, because we are so much stronger when we are together. And all this Aquarius energy is just really like emphasizing this point. And throughout this Pluto and Aquarius era, like this is all about the power in our communities and the power of the people. Like I always think of that movie, A Bug's Life, when I think of like, the power of communities and the power of the people, because it's like, all those ants finally came together and they worked together and got organized and they finally stood up and fought back against those asshole grasshoppers because there were like thousands of more ants than there were grasshoppers. And so that's like the power of the people and the power in our communities when we can, get organized and stand up against, any kind of oppression really. Because as we move forward, I really feel like it's getting, more and more important to get involved, whether it's like in communities or other kinds of organizations or like humanitarian pursuits, and, whether that's also like being an activist or getting involved in strikes and marches and, other kinds of protests. Because when you're just like, by yourself and like doing like the lone wolf thing, or you're isolating yourself even, it can feel really disheartening when we're, watching the news and seeing what's going on in the world. But then, like when you're getting involved and like, being a part of a community and you're really like taking part in something that feels like, larger than yourself, like, it just feels like, you're actually making a difference, and it really, really helps that feeling. And so again, with all of this Aquarius energy, there is like a really strong emphasis on those humanitarian efforts that are all about, like human rights and equality for all and freedom for all, because no one is free until all of us are free. Because Aquarius is the revolutionary who's like, that future-minded innovator who really, breaks out of the status quo and moves humanity and the collective forward. It's also a very like individualistic sign that's all about just like, being your authentic self within a community, because every single person, when they shine their authentic light, adds something. Not when you're trying to be like anyone else, and not when you're trying to be who you think everybody else wants you to be, but when you're just like being yourself and you're embracing your uniqueness and you're embracing your weirdness and just shining your own unique light. Like, this is what adds something to the collective, believe me. And I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot in this video, but I just really feel like moving forward, like especially with Neptune newly in Aries, like, this is all about authenticity and, being yourself and really just like being you. Because with Neptune at 0 degrees of Aries and, in the context of this full moon, it's really the beginning of a long cycle where it's like imagination meets courage. And so it may be illuminating like a new vision of who you could be if you didn't let fear be the one driving the wheel, or, who you could be if you didn't need that external validation, or who you could be if you just, let yourself be who you wanted to be. And so again, just kind of like, let this full moon be an invitation to allow more play and joy and fun and creativity into your life, and really just like, really indulge your inner child. Like, I feel like as adults, we can kind of get really busy, working and tending to our responsibilities and our duties and trying to check things off of our to-do list. And then, when it gets to the end of the day, we're so exhausted that all we want to do is just like tune out and distract ourselves or whatever. And so in this process, it's almost like we suppress those things that we're passionate about, and we suppress our creativity and like that free, joyful inner child energy. And don't judge yourself for doing this, because, we're all living in this capitalist hellscape right now, and it can feel really hard to, find the energy for those things that we're passionate about, and, find the energy for our hobbies or whatever it might be. And, like even me, I really struggle energy-wise, and I feel like I'm tired all the time lately. But maybe under this full moon, just, listen to what your inner child wants to do, and, schedule in time for it. And just tuning into your heart space and like, listening to what it is that just lights you up, that you feel passionate about, and that also invites more joy and fun and play into your life. And then with this Neptune moving into Aries, I really feel like, this is a little bit of a wake-up call for us to really, open ourselves up to what is really calling to us. And listening to like, where am I instinctively being called to and intuitively called to, and where is my soul trying to guide me next? And yeah, I have a lot more thoughts on Neptune and Aries, but I think I want to wait until I make like an actual video about it, because I want to adjust and just see where I'm being pulled next. But yeah, I think that is all I've got to say for this particular full moon for now. And so if you stuck with me this long, thank you so much for watching. And if you liked what I had to say, then be sure to leave a like and maybe comment down below where this full moon is happening for you. And yeah, until next time, make sure you're shining your light bright in order to find your own constellation. And yeah, until next time, love you, bye!